I mean, I really believe that we need to have another role on set that's created. How we language that, yet to be determined, but somebody who's focused on well-being.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem Mohammed, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument, where we discuss the essential qualities you need to stand out in the entertainment industry. According to research done by the Screen Actors Guild, film sets are more dangerous than careers in law enforcement, mining, and construction. I knew Hollywood was cutthroat, but that statistic takes it to a whole other level. Joining me on the show to discuss this pervasive issue of safety in the entertainment industry, especially on film sets and for folks in front of and behind the camera, I'm joined by one of the producers of the feature length documentary Safe Sets: Dying to Work in the Film Industry. Becky Morrison is the founder and CEO of The Light, an award winning production company based in New York and LA that produces films, series, and high end commercials. Becky kicked off her career on the Hollywood blockbuster I Am Legend, dabbled in animation on Disney's The Wild, then entered the world of rock and roll as visual content producer for U2's World Tour. Becky has spent years studying the history of Hollywood and uses her research to inform a new framework for conscious production. Becky, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, for the people listening out there, Becky and I met a few months ago on one of those commercials I just spoke about her producing. We did a Love's commercial, and that was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. You were incredible, Hassiem. You
Oh,
were
shucks.
amazing.
Thank you so much. And it's really funny, because I know you were on set, we were like, "Oh, when do we think it's gonna come out?" And you're like, "Probably pretty quickly." They've been working on this for a few months, and somebody I went to high school with shared it with me on I hadn't seen it, and then somebody tagged me from my high school. So that was kinda crazy. I was like, "Whoa,"
Wow.
that was the last person I expected to, see me doing this thing, and, yeah, really cool. It was funny when I booked it, my wife and I, we went to see a show that night. It was, Alvin Ailey's, show in December, and so I got the call when I was on my way to the show, and I show up and I go, "I'm gonna be a dad." And her friend, was with us as well. They, like, looked over at me, and then she goes, "Did you book that commercial?"
Nice.
Yeah, so it was all good. Had a ton of fun.
Yeah, those babies were amazing. It made me realize, like, shout out to the baby wranglers in the
Oh my
biz.
goodness. Yes, and if and
She was
yeah.
working.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She was great. One of the kids I got to work with, people see my commercial floating around, it's a kid with the curly hair, and he was the, like, best fist bumper at he could be a professional fist
Oh, I
bumper.
forgot. I remember that part. That's right.
We had to do, like, 20 takes of us fist bumping, and every time I just held up my fist, and little dude was like, "Boom, boom." Sometimes he wasn't even looking at me. He'd be, like, looking somewhere else, and they'd be like, "Alright, fist bump," and I'd hold my hand, and he just doop.
The kid's
Um
got a future in Hollywood.
Absolutely, and hopefully, because of your work, smooth transition here, hopefully his future in Hollywood will be very safe. Um, I got to see the Safe Sets documentary the other day. Thank you for sending that to me. Good God. I had no
Oh,
idea
no.
how hazardous it was to work on film sets, even though I've been on many. How did you come about being a producer on this film?
Well, this is a subject I've been passionate about for many, many years, and I actually wouldn't have framed it as safety. I think I've always been passionate about what I would call production innovation or reimagining the way we approach production, about focusing on the crew's well-being and their experience. And I saw a post on social media on an Instagram account called Crew Stories, which is very popular. A lot of crew go on there to post about different issues that happen on set. And I saw a trailer for this film, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to see this film. This is a movie I would have made." So I got in touch with the director. I saw a screening copy actually when I was on a shoot in Colombia, and then had a meeting with him and was so blown away by this film. Really, because I thought he masterfully is able to put everything under this umbrella of safety.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've struggled for a long time. We talk about like equity and inclusion and sustainability and well-being. And for me, it's always been clear that those have the same root, or the lack of those being present on set have the same
Sh-
root cause.
Sure.
And that whatever it is inside of us as human beings or as producers or as this industry that causes us to be extractive,
Mm.
of course, that impacts the planet, that impacts people. But I never quite had thought of it as safety. And I realized through watching this film that term, while it's not particularly sexy, it does it does embrace all of the issues that
Yeah.
we face. So I'm just so passionate about getting the word out about this project, and I'm just grateful to be a part of the team. It's such a important film.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, I didn't know what to expect either, safety, like, how sexy is that, But I sat down and I watched it straight through. I couldn't take my eyes away because it encompassed a bit more than I was anticipating, it was from sexual assault to some of the more obvious things like crew member hours. It's like, okay, yeah, we've heard about that. That's an issue. But then there was other stuff like makeup. And I was like, wait, hold up. As an actor, not thinking about like toxic makeup or like lead being used on set. And like that affects everybody. And so, like I said in the intro, this is stuff that affects people in front of and behind the camera. So I hope for the actors listening, like we're going to get into some stuff that very much affects us, which is why obviously I wanted to have you on the show.
So happy to be here. Let's get into it.
Okay, so right off the top, what were you most surprised to learn in your process of getting involved with this film?
Hmm.
Because, like you said, you've been an advocate for this, at least in some capacity, for quite some time. Was there anything that after you saw the doc, you were like, "Whoa, that's crazy"?
Oh my gosh, so many things I was like, "Whoa, that's crazy." Because the documentary, the way it's structured, for those of you out there, it's structured by, like, taking a specific issue and then telling the story of somebody who's been impacted or lost their life as a result of that issue. So it's a mixture of archival footage and telling that person's story, which is really where the emotional side of things come in.
Yeah.
What I thought I think the thing that impacted me the most was seeing how when you take these individual anecdotes and you put them together, it reveals the systemic nature of this problem.
Right.
I thought that was really revealing in just because I've heard about many of these incidents, like Sarah Jones. That was a very big one years ago when she died on the set of Midnight Rider, or
Yeah.
hearing obviously about what happened on the set of Rust, or you hear about all these Harvey Weinstein. Actually, I'm watching the film and there's a clip that's a protest outside of Harvey Weinstein's trial. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Why does this look so familiar?" And then I was like, "Oh, that's me." I'm in it. I, like, made a cameo unbeknownst to me because I
That's
was
crazy.
protesting outside of Harvey Weinstein's trial. But you
Mm,
take these individual things and then the systemic nature of it, I think that's really what impacted me the most. And
yeah.
then just the details of it, like you were pointing to the fact that about squibs, the story that's told about Breaking Bad and the squibs, and that, like, we still use squibs, which are the things, if you're an actor and you get shot on set and you have the little explosion that goes off, so it makes it look like blood and you've been shot, that a lot of those still use lead, which is a toxic chemical, and that using the ones that don't have lead just costs like a penny or 2 more per squib,
Yeah.
and that we're still using the ones that have lead in it. That was also really surprising.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, they all stem from the same place, which to me is just neglect. It's like, wait, what do you mean we're using these toxic lead squibs that are affecting all these actors on set? What do you mean the director's telling the actors, oh, just hold your breath? When there's an alternative that works just as well, and at the end of the day it's not gonna move the needle on your budget, you know? Like, that's the part that was kinda crazy to me. I was like, wow, we're really, in some circumstances, like, not being taken care of.
In so many circumstances. Yeah, neglect, whether it's greed, whether it's just I mean, I think also, you mentioned in my intro just the research I've done into the history of production. And when you look at the origin of these systems, it's never been designed to center the worker. So, I
Right.
mean, obvious
Go
hashtag
figure.
capitalism.
Right.
Um,
Right, right.
so yeah, it's not designed to be thinking about the worker and the ramifications that things have on them. It's centered around money and time because it matters to money. So really just
Yep,
money.
yep. So with that being said, as a producer, how do you ensure that your sets are safe places to work?
Well, I think it's hard to, like, ensure that my sets are safe in every way. I'm not sure that I can claim that. I can claim that I very much care about creating a safe environment on set and
Mhm.
focus on that. So, um, really, and safety has so many different flavors, right? There's physical safety, which is the obvious one, and hopefully we think of most of our sets as physically safe. The AD is responsible for that. We have safety meetings. But there's also the emotional, the psychological, and the spiritual, I would say, safety.
Yeah.
And the way that I do that on set is really about like focusing on the experience of the talent and the crew. So
Mm,
looking at it as if they're the customers, they're my clients. Is the grip, the PA, they're my clients. Yes, to the agency and client, but extending that same kind of treatment that we would provide the people in Video Village, providing that to everybody.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, and that's really thoughtful, and it's something about being on set, especially as an actor. I feel like they're watching the doc, there was just so much stuff that I'm like, I don't even know what was going on when I was on set. Like there could have been things that were unsafe that like I just wouldn't necessarily be privy to. So I feel like as a producer, as somebody who's kind of behind the table, we say, you know, for you to be giving that level of care, it means a lot. And it at least for me, thinking about the people that I work with, it's nice to know like, oh, this person supports a safe working environment. Um, Now, speaking of me being oblivious to stuff on set, how can actors protect themselves from hazards on set, like toxic makeup or like lead pyrotechnics? Do we have a voice in that matter?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I understand the complexity of being an actor and the dynamics of power and everything. But I think that, awareness and knowledge is also power. So being informed about what kind of things might be impacting your health on set and then speaking up about them. Speaking up, asking the makeup artist questions if you're concerned about toxic chemicals in the makeup. If you're in a scene with squibs, for example, asking about that.
Yeah,
So, without being antagonistic, simply being knowledgeable, aware, and inquisitive, I think are absolutely ways that actors can protect themselves.
heard. And for those listening who, not to assume this, but you may think like, oh, what's the big deal? I'm doing one scene, they're shooting off some stuff. In that Breaking Bad finale, if I remember correctly, they said the level of like lead dust in the air was like 400 times that what would be safe for someone to be around and exposed to. Um, and that's just crazy to think about. Like, this job that we enter because we just love to do it, you know, and to think that like it could cause serious health complications down the line. It's like, oh, you got to be on this incredible TV show like Breaking Bad, and 30 years later, you have XYZ complication. Not saying that's going to happen to those actors, but if we're being straight up, it could.
It
Like it
could.
reasonably, like if we're talking real life, it reasonably could. Like they were around an insane amount of toxic chemicals, and it could for sure affect their ability to just live life as a human being.
Absolutely, and I think you're pointing to something else, which for me is the biggest thing, is about culture. Is about the culture we have on set, a culture of self-sacrifice that really the only thing that matters is getting the shot. Like,
Yeah.
that matters above our health or our well-being or anything for that matter, and that, you know, I came up in production in New York and LA, and just, like, the language we use is so
Mhm,
steeped in military language. We talk
mhm.
about, like, being in the trenches, paying your dues. We gotta find the right
Right,
weapons for the battle, and it's like,
right.
we're doing a diaper commercial, bro. Like, what weapons, what battle? We have babies, but the culture and the language is steeped in self-sacrifice and in suffering, that somehow suffering, our own suffering is part of the filmmaking process, and that
Yeah.
we are to give of ourselves for these projects. And I think as long as that's part of the culture, we're going to continue to see these things on set.
Oh, that's such a good point. The culture aspect of it. As actors, we're expected to drop anything on a dime. If you get an audition appointment, it's like, oh, stop everything you're doing in your life, leave your job, if you have a day job, and go do this thing for the chance to maybe book a thing that could maybe elevate your career, put some money in your pocket. And it's like you're supposed to do that. Stay up late, hustle, hustle, hustle. Um, Absolutely. And the thing is, what I like to remind myself of whenever I think about that, and like, obviously, it takes hard work to make it in this business and in any business. You said suffering. Like, look, I know a lot of people who are suffering who aren't successful. So, like, how is that a prerequisite for success? Like we've accepted that, like, you have to. It's like that starving artist mentality. I absolutely hate that. It's like
Exactly.
I know a lot of poor people who are absolutely not successful. So why
Yeah.
do we assume and accept that to be successful you have to be poor? Like it's not those A plus B does not equal C all the
Yeah, or
time.
to be happy, you have to be successful. I mean, if you wanna
Or
break it down even more, like, I've had
yeah.
points in my career where things were soaring, and I was, like, living in a mansion in Bel Air
Mhm.
where because, like, I grew up listening to 90s hip hop, and as soon as I got some money, I was like, "We made it!" I got, like, a
Yeah.
mansion in Bel Air, but I was, like, crying in the hot tub every night because I was, like,
Mm,
so stressed out, and I just hated my life so much, and I
mm,
in that moment, I got the irony. I'm like, "Oh my god, like, what am I doing? Like, this
yeah,
I'm supposed to be have made it at this point," and I
yeah,
was so unhappy, you
yeah.
know? I
Us.
spoiler alert, I no longer have the mansion or the hot tub. And I
And
am
fun
happier, actually.
and funnily enough, that's how Will Smith went broke. 'Cause he got this big mansion. I remember reading his book, his biography, like, bought this big mansion, and, like, then he was bankrupt.
See,
Um,
that's what happens. It
yeah,
was a rental, thank God,
do
so
not recommend. Uh,
RIP.
Now there was another stat from the documentary that stated that arts and entertainment industries have the second highest rate of illicit drug use compared to any other industry. Why do you believe this to be the case?
I believe it's because of a lot of the things that we've been talking about. Like, in order to live in the way that we're expected to live and to perform in the way that we're expected to perform, no matter what our role is, it's like it almost has to be propped up by something, whether it's Red Bull or coffee or amphetamines, and then something to go to sleep, and just like the lifestyle of 14, 16, 18-hour days back to back of
Yeah,
all of that. It's not a natural state. It
yeah,
requires, like, those I think those kinds of substances a lot of times. I think there's
yeah,
that side of it, which is just not the party side, but the, like, I'm just trying
right.
to get through the day. Or, somebody who just did a report, her name's Tome Levy, she's amazing. She has an organization in the UK called IPC, which is all around injury prevention. I think the stat's like 79% of film workers have reported getting injured on the job. So if you
Woo.
also think that you're a freelancer and you have to work, like, a lot of times, I'm sure people are taking pain
Mm,
medication just to get through the day. So that speaks to the kind of just to get by function performance side
yeah.
of drug use. I'm sure there's also the, like, let's live it up in the mansion of Bel
Sure.
Air side, but I think that's probably the bulk of it.
That's no, that's fair, and then that's a really good point you just made. I mean, second highest of any industry, it can't just be the parties.
Right, exactly,
Like,
exactly,
that's
exactly.
and I knew that drug use was a thing in our business, like, come on, but I was surprised to hear that it was that high. But like you said, you think about it, think about those Teamsters that work those 16, 18-hour days and have to drive home, or the actors who have to, they're like, "Oh, we're shooting a night scene, so that means we're starting our shoot after sunset," which means like, okay, so now all of a sudden I'm nocturnal
Exactly,
and just am supposed to, like, no, our bodies don't do that naturally.
exactly. I remember even as a production assistant having to get, like, illicit drugs for a director pills. Like, the
Uh,
director I can't even remember what it was at the time, but it frantically the production was like, "The director needs Vicodin," or something, and I remember just, like, trying to scramble to get something, like, it felt like that was my
mm,
responsibility as a production assistant, was to get this
mhm.
director pills
That's
openly.
crazy.
So, I mean
That's crazy. And then,
yeah,
the power dynamic we talked about earlier, which also has to do with safety, is that as a PA, you were probably like, "This I have to do it. I'm
exactly.
down here, they're up here, and
Yeah.
I want a job." That's crazy.
Exactly. Or just all the things that come with that, right? Or I just remember there was a very famous director that I had worked with and who liked drinking iced chai. And so I had to like go get all these iced chais from Starbucks, but like he liked it with, a lot of ice. So I would be like crouched behind something, pouring extra ice into the iced chai because the ice had melted, like spilling all over me, just being
Oh
like,
my
oh, I
goodness.
hope he doesn't yell at me. you know, it's just like,
Oof,
yeah,
oof,
this
we've
biz.
yeah, all those stories, there's lots of those stories. Now, there's a particular incident that occurred in 2021 on the set of Rust that probably everyone has heard about. Their DP, Helena Hutchins, was fatally shot by the not only producer, but also the actor in the film, Alec Baldwin. I'm not gonna we don't have to go into, like, crazy details on the incident. I feel like people listening probably already know about it or could look into it. My question for you is, again, doing the work that you've been doing, do you believe that an incident like that was preventable? And if so, how?
100%, 100%. I looked a lot into this at the time,
Mhm.
and then just recently, a new documentary has come out on Hulu called Last Take:
Uh-huh.
Rust and the Story of Helena, which is also about this, and then in our movie Safe Sets, there's also information about this.
Yeah.
For me, the reason why that was preventable was because there were other things that were happening on that set that were problematic before the shooting, leading up to the shooting. If that had just been a one-off, you could say, chalk it up to just, like, chance, but that's not
Sure.
what happened. There was a culture there were problems on that set. The camera team, as you may know, walked off. They
Yeah.
resigned the day before because of safety issues. Very well-known prop master turned down the job saying, "This is an accident waiting to happen." The first AC who had resigned in his letter saying, "This is an accident waiting to happen, there are safety issues."
Uh,
They weren't, providing housing in the way that they had promised for the crew, so the crew was required to drive all the way back to Albuquerque. They were even more exhausted. There were 2 accidental firearm discharges and, like, an explosion discharge before that had happened.
oh,
So
Lord.
there was a culture on that set of things being rushed, of people being inexperienced. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was the armorer, was also I think her role was as, like, a prop assistant as well. She was in 2 roles at the same time.
Mm,
So, absolutely, that could have been prevented.
sure, sure. And is there anything yeah, okay, so I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA and Actors Equity. Like, is there anything that we can do as members of the union to, like, help with this? I don't know, I don't know if you have insight into that specifically, but, like, is there anything that because I know SAG doesn't necessarily have certain safety requirements, as I learned from the documentary. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's about being vocal. I think that a
Mhm,
union, like any organizing body, like politicians, hopefully, maybe we should leave that aside, respond to their constituents, like
mhm.
respond to their members. If enough members of SAG are saying, hey, this is important to us, we want you to be there to protect us. Let's have conversations. Let's have town halls. Let's bring in experts. Let's talk about what we can do. I think that absolutely that can create change. I mean, look what happened with intimacy coordinators.
Right.
That's very much in response to what happened with Me Too, and that's a new role that was created on set to protect actors from abuse. So that's a recent example of how something like that's been implemented.
Yeah, you hear that, guys? Let's use our voice, use our voice.
Yeah.
I mean, in our union, I mean, that's why we have a union, you know what I'm saying? So that we can get certain protections. A lot of times we think about, like, money and things like that, but it was kinda crazy for me to learn that, like, oh, SAG I don't know if it's a requirement now, so correct me if I'm wrong, but, like, didn't require a set medic. Like, that wasn't like a requirement. A lot of people had them eventually, but yeah, it was just kinda crazy to me. I'm like, what do you mean?" Like, there's so much going on set. You have gaffers literally doing construction, building these sets. There's equipment all the place, the lights, everything moving around. You're like, we're going back and forth from our trailer. A lot of times, like if you're shooting on location, I've shot a few shows here in New York City, and it's like we're crossing the street. There's a lot, and so it kind of stood out to me that certain things weren't required.
Absolutely, and I think I always have a medic on our sets that are bigger productions,
Yeah,
because I think it's a way to also show people that you care about them, because in
absolutely.
addition to emergency situations, the medic can provide, like, if you have a headache or you're dehydrated
Mhm.
or your stomach your tummy hurts, like, the medic is there to offer all of that as well. I mean, I really believe that we need to have another role on set that's created. How we language that, yet to be determined, but somebody who's focused on well-being. Someone who's there focused on mental health, on well-being.
Uh-huh.
There's also been incidents I've heard about on set where, I have a friend who was on a production, and there were 2 grips that were getting into a fight with each other on the grip truck, and
Oh
nobody
my
knew what
goodness.
to do, like, who's supposed to intervene? And
Sure.
the person who's an actor intervened because he was number 1 on the call sheet. Is that what you should be doing as an actor?
Wait a minute. Right, right. But now that you mention it, Beck, this is the stuff that, like, is so easy as actors because admittedly, or I'll speak for myself, I'm focused on doing my job, right? So you kinda put up blinders. You get on set, especially if you're younger. Well, both sides. If you're younger, maybe you're, like, nervous, and if you've been around for a while, you're a little more chill, and they can both result in you not noticing things. And what you just brought up to me was like, "Wait a minute. I don't think film sets are required to have, like, security."
Mhm.
Yeah, like, when I was shooting stuff in New York, like, if they have, let's say, a street blocked off or something, then there will be police presence, but they're not security, and if we're shooting, like, an interior, no.
Right,
There's
right, and right, is security the right person to intervene in that situation? Maybe, but to your point,
or
it
some
shouldn't
kind
be the
of
actor.
right, like, some
It
kind of person who that's their job, some kind of a
Exactly.
yeah.
Somebody who's that's their job, and also this person because that was another production, there were a lot of issues. People were coming to him all the time because he's known and he's seen as a leader of the production, and people weren't getting paid. The hair and makeup people weren't getting their checks on time, and they had tried to talk to production, which wasn't responsive, so they go to him. Well, because he's in the chair talking to him about getting their paychecks. So I think when there's nobody responsible for something, it falls on people whose responsibility it shouldn't be to take care of those things. I really think
Sure.
there needs to be a position on set, somebody who's trained in conflict management, somebody
Yeah.
who's able to help. Because if you think about it, we can have like 100 people on set. There's a lot of
Yeah.
personalities, there's a lot of people like issues that can arise. And I think that when we have these kind of crises on set or giant problems, it really points to the fact that something's not working interpersonally. And there's no
Mm.
one there to tend to the interpersonal dynamics on set.
There was another stat in the documentary, spoiler alert, lots of stats in the film, um, that from 2017 to 2021, OSHA only performed 2 total inspections on film and/or TV sets in the entire state of New York. I'll say that again. OSHA performed 2 inspections in 4 years across all film and TV productions. Why are regular inspections not a requirement of union film production? Like I said, they're building stuff. People are on ladders, they're hanging lights, like, that blows my mind.
Uh, I could not agree more. There's actually a great film that was made many years ago by a DP named Hassel Wexler. Wait, why can't I say that? Named by Haskell. Let me say that again.
It's not a common name, I can already tell.
Yeah. There's a great film that was made many years ago by a very famous legendary DP named Haskell Wexler, and it's called Who Needs Sleep? And it's available on YouTube. You can just watch it. It's 4 by 3, it looks very old. He just shot it on his camera himself,
Mhm.
walking around talking to crew, really about sleep deprivation. And in that,
Mm,
he goes to OSHA's offices and he's trying to talk to people at OSHA about this. And he cannot get anybody at OSHA to respond. They keeps getting the runaround. I mean,
mhm.
my sense is just without any expertise in this matter that OSHA is overloaded, overwhelmed. They don't have the bandwidth to be performing inspections on every film set. I would
Sure.
say also now, given that they're a US government regulatory organization, I can't maybe that stat is gonna go down to 0 or 1, um, given our current climate. So, I don't know. If anybody
Heard.
out there works for OSHA and is an actor on the side, maybe you could tell us, or
No,
an
sir.
actor and OSHA on the side.
Look, you can't have all the answers. I'm just curious. When I
Yeah.
heard that one, I was like, "Pause." I literally paused the documentary because I had to, like, they put up the chart, and I was like, "I need to read that again." Um,
Rewind.
yeah, copy. Okay, I got one final question for you.
Yeah.
As a producer, I think of producers as sort of the orchestrators in some capacity, and you're responsible for bringing people together. Yeah. Um, from actors to crew members, set, other producers, financiers, etc. As a producer, the kinds of people that you enjoy working with over and over again, what do they have in common?
Hmm. It's an excellent question, Hassiem. I would say the people that I love working with are great collaborators. They're flexible. They may not, and they're yes people in this, not yes people. Wait, let me say that again. So they're great collaborators. They're flexible.
Uh-huh.
They're people who are down to find a solution. I think
Right.
sometimes people can be resistant or antagonistic or just dig their heels in, and that's not a fun person to work with, even if we can't do something to have a solution for what we can do. So having ideas, having great energy, I know that sounds pretty vague, but that's actually really important to me.
Sure.
I think being a producer is being a curator of souls. So a
Mhm.
lot of the time I'm thinking about who's gonna go well with this other human being.
Yeah.
All the time I'm staffing up something right now and I'm like, "Okay, which first assistant director is gonna go well with this director and this
Mm,
producer?" Because it's not just who's great on their own, but it's how are they gonna fit with everybody else.
right.
So I really look for people who are positive, who are kind, who are not going to perpetuate a culture of cruelty on set,
Yeah.
people who are not yellers, people who are positive to work with.
Mm. I love that. Love that for so many reasons. One, you say they're solution oriented. I'm a big proponent of that. And I think you gave us a lot of suggestions towards solution today in this interview, things that actors can do. We can speak up, we can grab that first AD, we can leverage our union to help make sets safer for everyone. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate how you just described your sets because that was my experience on set of the Loves commercial. You had name tags for everybody.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I've never been on a film set where I could just look at somebody and be like, ah, that's their name or that's their responsibility. Such like a little simple thing just made my experience on set um that much better. And it was a lot of fun, and so, yeah, I can concur that that's how you run your sets, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. That was a
Absolutely.
lot of fun.
Now, Becky, Safe Sets, the doc, if somebody wants to view it or schedule a screening, how can they go about doing so?
Oh, they can, hit us up on the website. We have a form about scheduling a screening because it's not out yet, doesn't have distribution, so it's not streaming, but it's making its rounds to festivals. And we're also arranging for private screenings at unions, at, different educational institutions. So please contact us through the website, which
Amazing.
is safesetsmovie.org.
Boom. Safesetsmovie.org. Becky, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Um, can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great being with you, Hassiem, and all of you out there.
If you enjoyed this conversation with Becky and are maybe interested in the ins and outs of producing, then I recommend you check out a recent interview I did with Tony Award winning producer Jordan C. Medley. So be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for tapping into this episode of The Actor's Instrument. Huge shout out to our co producers over at Red Letter Entertainment. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.